Dorian, welcome to the show.
Hey, Mark, nice to be here.
Yeah, no, I'm happy you get to support me. I'm not sure if this will ever make it live the way we're doing it because I'm flying solo today, but you get to be part of this experiment.
Hey,
so
we'll try to make it good enough to make that bar.
yeah. So before we go any further, what do you do?
I am a public insurance adjuster.
Okay. What does that mean?
We negotiate insurance losses on buildings and their contents on behalf of insureds and on behalf of building owners. Most of our work is in fire-related work, but we've had a wide variety of other loss types. But in the Chicago metropolitan area, that's mostly apartment building owners in particular. That's a big focus there, but we have done everything from residential on through high-tech, industrial, meatpacking plants, restaurants. Doesn't matter what it is. I call it bricks and sticks.
Are you from Chicago?
Yes, I am.
Like you grew up here, like born and raised?
Yeah, I grew up on the northwest side of the city. I should have gone to Foreman. I went to Lane Tech.
Okay.
I grew up in the same house my mother grew up in, actually.
Wow,
so
come
that
on.
was kind of, unusual, unusual for that era.
Yeah, yeah.
Greek immigrant and an Austrian immigrant,
Okay.
which for 1925 wedding was a rare thing. Most of the Greeks are in bed with the Greeks, and that's the end of it. But
Yeah,
on one side of the family, I've got that mix. On the other side, it's Greek and Greek. But yeah.
Did you end up marrying a Greek, or would you marry?
No. I've been married a couple times, engaged another time, and now I am finally settled into a wonderful Italian woman who's my age. And we met in 2015, and it was a kind of an accident. She was married, and then life changed, and here we are.
All right, so you've had a few different careers, you've had a few different wives, so we got that.
I've had 2-3 different careers, yes, but most of the career, the 3 careers has been short. The public adjusting side, I've been on this side exclusively since 1990, but through the 80s, I was a GC, and Episcopal Church was one of my clients, and so the priest who I did a tremendous amount of work for, and he was the chaplain to the University of Chicago, and he was running the Bishop Brent House, it was called at the time, and I did a massive renovation in that building. And then umpteen years later, he married me, so we know the work was okay.
All right. That's good retention of customers, so that's great.
Yeah, no, good. I love the bricks and sticks. I've done a lot of hands-on stuff. It's one of my challenges has been that we don't manage people particularly well, so we never grew things. So, but when it comes to the finesse of things being done just right, I own and operate over 65 apartments. During COVID, my 5 worst apartments became available. As we know, there was not much traffic. You weren't going to rent them. Who are you going to rent them to? So we got rehabs on them. So I had 8-10 guys working for me for 12-14 months. We spent a lot of money. But the rents they came off at the end, and they are my best apartments. I love clean and paint. That's all you got to do.
I was talking to a business owner the other day. He's got 65 employees. He's like, I love running this business except for the people. I'm like, man, like you are like.
Hey, it's challenging, but yeah.
So these buildings you updated during COVID, you've had these buildings for a long time. Like,
37 years. Most of what I have, we've had my partner 𝗏𝘃𝗏𝗏 and I. We're partners in both businesses. The buildings and Alpha Adjusting we've had them for, I think we're up to 37 years now.
Wow. So talk to us about 37 years ago. Like what, before we dive into insurance, like what made you, would you have the strategy of like, I'm going to buy these and keep them for 37 years?
Yeah.
Talk to me about the neighborhoods they're in. Like give us a little lowdown on your thinking back then.
We're talking Edgewater, and we're talking East Edgewater and East Rogers Park.
Which were drastically different 37 years ago.
Oh, yeah. The price per door was like insanely low. If I would have had a little bigger cojones or a little less, if I was less of a micromanager, if I was less of it's got to be a certain way, because I don't build anything, I've never built anything that I wouldn't live in. I live in my 35 unit at Kenmore and Ardmore.
Okay.
I've lived there for 30 years now.
Okay.
We raised four kids out of there. The youngest of whom is 29. Oldest is 42. So, yeah, we were, very hands-on, I know everybody by first name, especially back in the day. It's a little distance now just because I have to, and it's time for that. But, yeah, 35 plus years ago, in the space next to my office, there was a little Indian guy who had operated a store. It was 3 stairs down at Kitty Corner across the street from St. Ignatius. And he moved into the space next to my office, which later on became New Leaf Organic Grocery. But there was a guy who showed up with a rifle for a robbery.
Really?
Okay, in his trench coat. So, yeah, people have, more than one person has told me, Dorian, you're going to get shot, because I'm like, hey, buddy, this is my corner. I cannot move the building. Move your shit. And, I do it with enough gruffness and enough, like, who's this crazy white guy, that it always played pretty well. I mean, there's been a couple of things that were near confrontations, but in 2 of those situations, people actually the next day went and came and apologized to me. So I keep doing it. But yeah, it's been a long, long road on those things. I mean, we love the bricks and sticks, and they have tremendously increased, as we all know, in value. But cash flow is a different thing. And
When 37 years ago, like, was it a conventional loan? You put 20% down. You went to the local bank. Like, what was it? A lot of our keep in mind, a lot of our listeners have only been investing since the crash, so they don't know pre-recession. They don't know
no history there at all.
So
and to a certain degree, that's a really good thing. 𝗦𝘃𝗲𝗃𝗵𝗁 and I, who's a good dear friend of mine, the woulda, shoulda, coulda, the deals we passed. It's just amazing, right? But the first deal was done where we didn't have any equity. You couldn't find a regular bank to do those things. I was connected to the Lane Bank system, which Lakeview Bank and Northwest National Bank, there were Pioneer Bank, there were 4 or 5 banks that were all there, and we had been banking there for years. My father had, et cetera, et cetera. But there was nobody to do conventional loans then. And so our first loan was with Chrysler First Business Credit.
okay, sounds like a credit union.
Not a credit union, they're not that even-handed. No, it's no, ball-busting numbers. And in the end, they took my 2-flat. I lived in Lakewood Balmoral at the time. They took my 2-flat as the collateral. So we did what we had to in order to get things done, and eventually we landed up with regular paper on the buildings and being connected to the Lane banks. Eventually, I got to 𝗦𝘃𝗲𝗃𝗵𝗁, who's at Albany Bank now, and I followed Mike through. He's been at several locations, and so he's always been very good with us. But he's an old school banker. I know who's going to pay me. I know who I'm going to have to chase, and I'm not even dealing with those guys. So Mike's a different story, but wonderful guy, and. So we've always kept our loan-to-value ratios really low. We never borrowed money to buy it and then buy. That's a strategy.
What's low? A lot of people have. That's a very
30. Under 50%.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean we poured money into the buildings. We took the money and put it in, and I felt it needed to be done. I just do it. And Kurt writes the checks. So it's been a little bit of, there's a little friction there once in a while, but at the end of the day, the results are good tenants. Knock on wood, I've only been in eviction court 3 times since 1977, which is my first building in the 5400 block of Kenmore. That my father bought that building for $30,000, 32 units.
$30,000.
$30,000.
What year was that? What year was that?
October 1977.
Okay. Wow.
The building had a murder in it. It had a fire to cover the murder. It was purportedly slated for demolition. It was the 𝗬𝘃𝗃𝗃𝗃 corridor with all of the bad stuff. The hookers would knock on the windows if you were at a stoplight, if you were a stop sign. You know, it was rough. But I didn't know any better.
Yeah.
And so my father had bought that building with a tax client of his who was a Northwest Side guy who was single, whose philosophy in life was better to do nothing than make a mistake. He didn't trust copper piping. So the first 3/5 of the building was all the plumbing was changed. The bathtubs got hammered out because they're all cast iron. The bathtubs went out. All the plumbing went out. All the hot, cold, return, all the risers, all the horizontals. I did them in pipe. I still had my rigid 300.
Okay.
My father was an accountant, and he had several clients who were in the trades. Paul Bowen and Sons were the masons. Anderson Day were union carpenters. You know, he had guys. He had a drywall guy, and he had people. And so they would come on the weekends or whatever, and that's how we put this building back together. And J&R Carrozza Plumbing was the plumbing contractor. My father had an office in their building on 𝗲𝗏𝗵𝗁 and Nelson, just a little bit west of where we grew up.
Yeah.
And plumbing inspector came. Contractor left. When the plumbing inspector left, and I was the guy. And so you want to turn a wrench? Let's go. So I've been a hands-on bricks and sticks guy, and it served us well on the one hand. On the other hand, we never were able to grow it. So there's something to be said for your listeners who are starting out. It's really important to learn. You don't have to do it professionally, but if you're gonna really know what the product is and you're trying to produce a product, you really need to know that. And I think this matters for any business. If you're gonna run a restaurant, you don't have to be the chef, but you better know what goes on in your kitchen. And the only way to know what goes on in your kitchen is to actually have spent time in kitchens.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing in the building business, right? I mean, you got to know all aspects of it, even if you don't do it every day, because otherwise you don't know when you're getting, you get a little story here or there, or whether it's a tenant or a contractor, you got to pick and choose on a regular basis. And let's face it, in our world, as dealing with contractors, we've certainly seen some people over time who were fabulous, and then all of a sudden something happened in their life and something changed, and all of a sudden the guy went from being a spectacular guy to being like a problem. Well, pay attention, because things change. So at all times, being nimble matters.
Well, you said something there that I think is super important. We always on the show encourage people to jump in. Like, people wait years to buy their first property. We say jump in, but at the same time, you brought up a point of just don't do dumb things. Like, I think you better do nothing than do something stupid. And I think a lot of the advice out there doesn't say this, but what I love to say is you don't have to be perfect and make all the right decisions. You just have to make less dumb decisions.
Yeah, there's a phrase, don't make perfect the enemy of good, or something. It's just like, sometimes it's going to be good enough. You can't make it perfect. If you're a perfectionist, you got to examine, why are you a perfectionist, and does it apply in this situation? And to the extent that it's misappropriated, you're going to not get as far as maybe you could or should, and you may not like the results at the end of the day.
I'm sure you've been down this road before, and I have as well, where it's like a lot of times when I look in hindsight of dumb mistakes I made, there's plenty of red flags that I ignored or I justified away. and so a lot of times it's not like the COVID that comes out of nowhere and blindsides you. Right. It's those three red flags are things you totally ignored, and you actually went against what people told you to do. And this is why you're in the situation right now.
I am a very intuitive guy. And I recommend to people all the time, trust your gut. There's times things that you don't know why you know them, but you know them, and back to your point. Yeah. You were referring, I didn't listen to so-and-so's advice, but right here.
Yeah.
In your gut, you were like, should I not? And then it's like, you need to step back from those things a little bit. You can't be paranoid. So I think that's a challenge for people without a lot of experience, because something's telling you, don't do that. But then you're going, well, that's where maybe this is the risk analysis. Maybe this is why nobody else is doing it. So therefore I should. Well, is that true?
37 years later,
okay.
What advice would you give our listeners that are in the early part of their 37-year journey?
I got distracted from building the real estate portfolio, Kurt and I both, because we needed to bear down on the money-making end of the operation is the adjusting side, okay? When we put the construction away, the restoration work that I was doing included in that in 1990, Kurt only had a half a dozen clients at that point. And we were talking about a little bit before about the cyclical nature of things. And so his client base aged out. They sold, they retired, they died, they gave it to the kids did things differently, you name it, right? And if you don't have enough people with your phone number in their phone and enough disasters with your name on it, you don't stay busy. So I landed up in 1990 starting to hit the pavement. And so I spent the next 15 years probably chasing business, literally, and built an entire new clientele out of a different generation of people. Some of those old guys are still around, but it's different. And so it's a new generational thing. To your question, we didn't continue to build the portfolio because there's a limit to how much we could do. And since neither one of us are actually people managers, we didn't go, oh yeah, hire this guy, do this, take this off my plate. And we weren't able to do that. So at the end of the day, both businesses are still essentially mom and pop operations. Mom and pop operations are great. And so I get emails all the time from companies who want to, they want to merge with us, or they want to buy us, or, hey guys, you don't even know what you're talking about. But it's in many business sectors, there's been this aggregation. And we even see it in real estate. I mean, the mom and pop guys who 20 years ago were abundant are being squeezed out of the marketplace today. I mean, we all see this. And it's not necessarily a good thing. It's a little bit like what's happened in agriculture. Think about the family farm is a thing of the past. Yeah. And everything is agribusiness. And you don't have, 40,000 acres to farm, you're nobody. Well, is that a good thing for society? Which is a whole nother question. But how do you stay focused? I'm sure plenty of people start out with a day job and then they're going to buy a building. There's something to be said for just clearing the decks completely, just diving right in, be as smart as you can be at any given time, and just work your ass off, because that's how we got where we are.
If you could do it again, would you have continued the real estate side of things? Or at least added some more along the way?
If I could do it again, we would have gone to school somewhere, somehow, to figure out how to grow a business, to have, in fact, acquired more. Because we didn't ever want to take on something we couldn't manage. Of course. And you think back to those, the story I told a little while ago about a guy who robbed the grocery store with a rifle. Yeah. Those are real things. Yep. Well, there's a limit to how much you can stretch. Things weren't easy. There were times when I was like, what are we doing here? And we chewed our fingernails. We got through it because of our grit. So advice, don't even get involved if you don't have the grit. And if you got it, use it and keep moving. And make sure the rest of your team, whether it's your wife or your kids or your brother-in-law, everybody's on the same page, because you cannot afford to have somebody rolling the other way.
I heard a quote a few months ago, and keep saying it, is you underestimate you overestimate what you could do in a year, you underestimate what you could do in a lifetime. So we all set off in January 1st thinking we're going to do all these things, and we never accomplish them, but ultimately we don't look as far as our entire life of what we could actually accomplish. And that grit is something that comes down to looking at the longer term and grinding it out.
Yeah, we've certainly done, put one foot in front of the other, and you get your head down, you're putting one in front of the other. You sometimes got to pick your head up and figure out which way you're going, because there's opportunities that, when I drive around the neighborhoods, there's neighborhoods that have gone, that have grown astronomically. And there's people I know who are in the uptown neighborhood, and this goes back, go back a long ways now. And they kind of started out they're the same generation as many of the people who made millions in Lincoln Park, because the values changed. Back in the day when there was urban renewal in Lincoln Park,
Our listeners don't know what those two words go together.
Yeah, if you don't, exactly. If you don't, when I drive down Lincoln Avenue, I can tell you which buildings are, they were put there as urban renewal projects. I mean, they look like this. That's not what they were in the beginning, and that was quite a hellhole. But those people who took chances there because of the timing and the location made hay. The neighborhood dramatically changed. Well, if you did the same thing in Uptown, you waited another 25 years to begin to catch that.
Yeah.
And so it depends on where you go. And the point is, maybe you're in your own backyard. It is a good thing. I was connected to Edgewater and Rogers Park because of 𝗕𝘵𝗃𝗃𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗃𝗀𝗃𝗃𝗃 father-in-law. And also, my grandparents had lived in a co-op at 5505 𝗬𝗏𝗏. And then the building my father and his partner bought at 5402 through 12 North Kenmore was, right in the neighborhood there. That's the building. So that's where we cut our teeth. And that's the footprint that we know. And I can walk to all the buildings if I want to. Doesn't mean it's the best option.
Yeah, but being in your backyard, and we talk about a lot on here of you could be best at what you're familiar with, and you're super familiar with your backyard at the time, and still are.
Yeah, and it's worked out really well. But for anybody getting started, they need to think about their backyard, and is their backyard, what kind of a trajectory do you think it's going to have? And the reality is that if we knew what we knew now, all sorts of things would be different. You asked the question, and I answered it in terms of skills, because I think the skills at the end of the day are what is the actual engine.
What allows us, or what caps us at the same time.
Thank you. That's even better. What allows us to do the kind of things that we want to do. And you got to come with the skills. And if you don't have the skills, you got to come with the curiosity. And you have to have the time. So you have to be a little careful of biting off more than you can chew, which has always been a phrase for me: don't bite off more than you can chew. Because then you disappoint people. It's to your phrase, flip that phrase around: over produce, under promise.
Yes.
Same thing. And so the mistake that we did is we could have bought the block at the prices things were going off at, theoretically. But it had some challenges in it, and who knew it was going to go where it did?
Yep. So jumping off to, we did a whole episode just on your real estate career and your experience in the neighborhoods up north there. But I really want to have you on here because we've never talked about what your business is today and the claims adjuster and when people use it. And it's such a value. A lot of people don't even know you exist.
Yeah, that's a fact.
At the same time, though, your industry gets looped in with ambulance chasers, board up guys, shadiness, and maybe help us understand the difference between you, the board up guys, and the ambulance chasers. For that actually, every time I've had a fire, I never knew from anybody else but somebody that wants to board up my windows.
Right.
So break us down kind of where you fall into that and in that industry a little, because it's a whole other side that hopefully.
Let me try to give you a picture on the industry. Less for you, but I'm trying to be big picture for your listeners. Historically, it was a very easy entry, low bar to get into. In the 80s, the state put in regulations, required licensing, but before that, there wasn't any I'm a public adjuster, sign here, and you get the hustle bustle in the middle of the night, and especially for the single family owners, they just signed the paper because somebody said, I'm going to get new windows for you. Okay, sounds great. It's an industry, because of the disaster side of it, that has a very emotional, for most people, even for some multifamily owners, it can have a very emotional impact on them. We've had some horrendous cases over the years where kids have died. I mean, we've been through all sorts of stuff. And in those moments, people are more susceptible to the hustle bustle factor, okay? There's not much in the way of regulation in the industry. And when it does show up, it shows up in some challenging ways, because the legislature and the Department of Insurance tends to be reactive. And in the current time frame, we're long past licensing laws and regulations there, but there's a lot of bad actors, if I will call them, who are storm chasers, especially when it comes to wind and hail claims. And they are besieging the industry with claims that, some have merit, some don't have merit, but they throw it on the wall and see if it sticks, and then they bring in the heavy guns, and then they're going to create a cat fight, which doesn't always end well.
Well, let me help break this down a little. So
Go.
I love to walk through a scenario, because there's a lot of people who've never been in this situation. They could listen to this and at least know. So it's 2:00 in the morning, and they're getting a call, and they're getting a call from somebody, one of the board up guys. Maybe it's a tenant, maybe it's a neighbor, because your sign's supposed to be on the building saying you're managed by.
Could be all three.
And you get a call, and you have to. You have the top 2 units had a fire. You're not sure what happened. You're not even sure if anyone got hurt. But you're getting a call from strangers, random strangers, saying, hey, I could do this. You just got to do that. Like, walk us through those scenarios of what our listeners will actually go through. If they do this long enough, I always say, if you're in business long enough, if you haven't been sued yet, you haven't been in business long enough. But same thing with fires and these type of scenarios. If you have enough properties and own it for long enough, you are going to have this 2 a.m. problem.
The more exposure you have, the greater the likelihood it's going to be. And what it is, it's not a question of if, it's only a question of when. Okay? The phone starts ringing. Somebody gets your phone number. Maybe it's one of your tenants, but in all likelihood, it's probably somebody trying to provide a service. And there are a lot of providers of services, mitigation companies and border companies, are out there chasing the business. And as in any business, there's people all over the spectrum in terms of quality standards and ethics, and people who are just taking advantage of things. We've been called recently on a case where the remediation contractor got into the property, didn't create any consensuses. This is on a restaurant, did all this demo on the basis of water mitigation because it was drywall, and then served up a $100,000 bill without any documentation, any moisture meter mapping, nothing. And now there's a problem. Guy's restaurant's closed. Everybody's pulling their hair out. What do you do? Bad actors could be avoided. But what will happen is...
Let me break that down there, because this is real. When it's 2 in the morning or 2 in the afternoon, and you're busy at work. Either way, these people are calling, and sometimes these things are... Like, that guy might have said, hey, I'm going to clean up all the water damage. The guy on the other end who owns the restaurant's like, yeah, please, just I don't know what else to do. Please help me. Right. That guy goes and just does way far beyond, because he thinks he's going to get paid by the insurance company.
That's right.
And he submits a $100 bill. Right. And you said before, maybe it sticks, maybe it doesn't. But that guy's... So
this is the kind of thing where what we're talking about is people need to know certain things. We talked before, you need, as a building owner, you need to know the trades in some, you need to have some familiarity. You need to know who to call when you're up against something you don't know about. I think people who are not inclined to reach into their toolbox for who has information are at higher risk than other people about picking the right guy who's going to say, oh, I'm going to do this, this, and this. Well, are you? Really? Let's find out for sure. But what people will have, they'll show up at their building and they'll have a half a dozen people or a dozen people, depending on the size of the loss, out there saying, hey, hire me, hire me. And there's all sorts of stories and there's a lot of misinformation. And the question becomes, what's true? So who do you trust?
Because those people are listening to the scanner. They're hearing where the fires are happening. They're hearing where these things are, and they're showing up. That's how they get there, just the level site, so people understand how they end up at your property.
They're tied into whatever, and you'll get into some communities where so-and-so's got a relationship with the department, and the department says, you guys go and you stay. Wait a second. This doesn't sound copacetic to me.
Like, no, like
well, that doesn't happen in Chicago, but that happens in some of the suburbs.
Gotcha. All right.
Okay. And it's the kind of thing that shouldn't happen. The more people know about what the processes are and what the particular agendas are of the people they're hiring, the clearer they'll make decisions, in my opinion.
But these guys' agendas are to do some work, and more than likely they're going to charge a higher amount because it's an emergency situation, and they think they're going to get reimbursed by insurance.
They don't have to even charge a higher amount. So let's clarify that. Let's break that down a little bit. Okay. So it's not, if you hire somebody and they send a bill up the ladder and they say, you know, it's 50 grand, it doesn't mean the insurance company's going to buy it. There's ranges of pricing for everything and anything that is involved in a building. If it's got a damage, we can put a number to it, okay? And that goes for all the services also. Yes, there's extenuating circumstances here or here. Okay, great. It's identifiable, and we can put a price on it, and we can come to an agreement with people who are agreeable personalities and are reasonable. Insurance company pricing, when it's got the full range of scope that it deserves, because my world breaks down to what is the scope, what is the pricing for that scope on a line item individual basis, okay? How much depreciation will the carrier withhold? And then maybe it has a co-insurance thing, which is a different story, but those are the pieces. A remediation company who walks in and starts taking stuff out, if they're doing it right, and if they're mapping it properly, and they're identifying where the flood cut should be and shouldn't be, and they're doing it in an appropriate way, the pricing they're going to collect, the pricing's not bad. Believe me, these guys, there's not so many of these companies floating around these days. 25 years ago, 30 years ago, we would have to argue our hearts out to get a company adjuster to say, take this drywall out because it's wet. Nobody thought of mold the way they think about mold now 30 years ago. Now, get it out. So this is what they prey on, and then they start wrecking things that they probably shouldn't. And that's how an insured gets upside down. The pricing isn't the issue. It's the documentation, it's the lack of integrity that goes along with it, it's the agenda. If you get, somebody used the phrase the other day, if the only tool you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail.
Yeah.
And you're gonna hit it. Okay, well, if you ask a surgeon how to solve the problem, he says, get on the table, I'm gonna cut you. A remediation guy says, oh, take it all out. Well, let's get consensus. We're in the business, especially in our particular stance in the industry, our position in the industry, is one of building consensus with company adjusters. The companies and the adjusters have the power of the pen. We're not looking to have a cat fight. Everything is rational. Everything is reasonable. Certainly there's subjectivity to it. There's plenty of subjectivity. There's very little that's just black and white. No, there's an awful lot of gray in between. And so benefit of the doubt matters, but that's a negotiation. That's a process of, if you're the company adjuster, you get to say, well, I don't really agree with you, but okay, I'll pay you for it because I got you the 51% of the decision to you. Okay, next item. The vendors who go in and abuse their privilege cause all sorts of industry issues. They give the industry as a whole a bad name, and there are constant efforts by a number of the carriers to actually license public adjusters out of the business. It's happened more than once. It's kind of an ongoing thing. It's kind of like the real estate taxes. We all know they're always going to go up. They're never going to be stable. The most egregious of that, as an example of differences of opinion that shouldn't be, and this may be a separate part of the conversation, but there's policies now that the first page of the policy is anti-public adjuster endorsement. If you even talk to a public adjuster, we don't have to pay you.
We'll have to circle back to that.
It's a huge issue.
Yeah. What? So let's. I want to break it down a little because I don't want to run out of time. There's so much here. You get that call 2 a.m., 2 in the afternoon. You got a fire. These guys are calling. Should somebody use those people, and what should they use them for, or should they have their own guy?
Some of those people are good people. The question is,
you have to.
In a perfect world, you want to have a relationship with somebody who you know, like, and trust.
Yeah.
Okay. If you're creating that on the spot, maybe that is good, maybe it's not. But the jury's out on that until after the fact.
But is there a bare minimum you have to do, like in a fire? I know for me, a few of the fires we've had, I just want to get it boarded up. They might charge me $1,500-$1,800. I get it done, and at least the city's off my back because I can't get trouble. So, like at that call, if you have a fire, you have something like, what's the bare minimum you should be doing before we get to the insurance part, which I'll bring you into that circle right now.
So every insured has the obligation, whether they know it or not, under every policy exactly, to protect the property from further damage.
Yes.
That property is. The whole reason water mitigation happens is because the expanded damages are mold growth. So we maybe need to take that out. We want to make sure the income stream, carrier is entitled to maintain the income stream because they're insuring you for that. So if you can restore this guy's apartment without too much trouble because he doesn't have much damage, then do so. If he doesn't have a back porch, he doesn't have a second egress, it doesn't work. So liability exposure, it's huge. We don't need something falling out of a window or falling off the roof. So those are the things that have to happen, yes. So if you don't have your own staff to begin to do those kinds of things, and the board up is certainly one of those things where even some of my clients who are contractors and big players, they're like, we're not going to pull somebody off of a job to take care of this. Just put one of these guys on it, and it gets paid. That's not where you necessarily get into trouble.
No, I know.
But to that point, I had one recently where it was a fire in December, and the building needed to be winterized. Well, they said, we winterized. The bill for winterization on the floor flat was $3,000. I said, excuse me? The water meter was still in place. The valve couldn't be shut off. You had to have the city turn the water off before you can even drain the system. Okay, those are the kind of overstepping that if somebody doesn't know what they're looking at, they get taken to the cleaners. Again, it comes down to an integrity issue. At the end of the day, the only real defense for this is making sure that amongst your tools in your tool bag, you got a plumber, you got an electrician, you got managed, whatever you have, okay? You need to be having a relationship with other people, and maybe it's through your agent, who, if the agent is not a guy who's overly beholden to the carriers, but is actually caring about you, will say, hey, here's how this works. I got you the best carrier I could get you. This is what you need to do now.
All right, so they get these people, they're calling them, they're gonna, these people on site that might board it up or might winterize it if they could turn the water off, they are able to give people prices over the phone, and you might agree to boarding it up, and then that gets you through the night at least.
What usually happens, nobody gives you a price over the phone.
I've always made them give me a price.
You can, but and they will if you ask, I suppose. But most of the time, there's unit pricing for this kind of stuff. It's within reason, and as long as it's reasonable, it's going to fly.
Yeah.
Virtually all of the board-up companies, almost all of the board-up companies that are out there, not all, but majority of them are all owned by adjuster contractor operations all rolled into one. They're vertically integrated.
Yes.
So we'll take care of the board up, and now we'll take care of the personal property contents, and we'll do the mitigation, and we will do the repair. And all you got to do is sign the check.
But in that scenario, though, I want to just get to the morning. Like, that's usually my solution. Like, I just want to get to the morning because I want to call somebody I trust.
Right.
Which would be someone like you at that point. Obviously, I got to call my insurance guy.
Yeah.
He's going to submit the claim, and then I'm going to call you and say, hey, man, send me the agreement. I need to get somebody on this adjustment.
Well, okay, so every situation is different. People who know me pick the phone up before they even call their agent in many cases to say, Dorian, we had a problem. What are we going to do with this? In the current marketplace, because the market is so hard, I have given a tremendous amount of advice lately to say, hey, you don't have a liability issue here. Looks to me like this is below your deductible. Do you really want to make a claim? Because you're going to pay for it for a long time.
Yeah, especially with insurance going up right now.
So every situation is different. The fact of the matter is, rarely do you have to do, you want to keep the city happy. We had one just a couple weeks ago where we landed up putting 150 feet of full barricade.
So you might barricade or you might fence it?
On Morgan.
Okay.
On South Morgan. You had barricade the whole thing. And the city inspector wasn't leaving until he saw the last piece put up. You can't afford to fight with City Hall. So you do what you got to do. Make these people happy. You don't want any risk. Minimize the risk to yourself, to your company, to your tenants, to the carrier. The place where we are all aligned with our carriers, because I buy insurance too, is when it comes to liability. We don't want them having we don't want an incident that is going to make us more uninsurable in the future.
Yeah.
Avoid risk at all times. If you see there's a problem, get it taken care of. Let's not have a trip and fall for no reason.
All right.
It's avoidable.
So make sure you're reducing your risk overnight. In the morning, they might call you. But your goal, let me make sure I'm going to paraphrase some of this, but investor like myself hires your company to come in and basically communicate with my insurance carrier's adjuster. Because that guy's going to say, hey, listen, based on the damage I see, they might visit a property, you're going to visit a property, and you're going to make sure that you're getting the most amount for the claim to cover my butt.
All right, so if you have a loss tomorrow and you call me, the first thing we're going to do is go to the property together. We're going to walk and talk, and we're going to come up with a game plan about what is to be done and what is not to be done in terms of to stabilize the property. Number one, that may be boarding it up and leaving it alone. That may be winterizing it. That may be sending in a cleaning contractor to do some temporary cleaning. We'll have to decide. After the building is stabilized, and it could be, we're seeing a week later in some cases, the carriers don't have enough staff, and in some cases, the insured is sitting there with no activity for 3, 4, 5 days. Well, you can't just sit there with nothing. Okay, so we're able to at least, hey, do this, don't do that. Get this roof temporarily, it's got a tarp on it, great. Call your roofer and tell them to cap it with a piece of modified bit, because that tarp is going to tear. And now we're going to have a water problem. And then the carrier is going to say, you didn't protect the property for the damage. We're not paying you for that. I don't want to have that kind of an argument. Only after the building is stabilized and we have an adjuster to walk and talk with does that end of the process, that element of the process start, where we're actually going to walk and talk with the company adjuster, item by item, room by room, in order to come up with a consensus about what the scope is. In my shop, we never let an insurance company adjuster operate it on their own. If the page is blank, there's nothing for us to argue about. We get to write on it together, and we're going to have our opportunity to have a conversation about these things. And the way in which, if you're the company adjuster, the way in which we have created consensuses in the past and have had conversations about inclusions and exclusions of elements, that's what's between people's ears. If we're attorneys, it's in the law book. From 1978, there was a case. No. That doesn't happen in my world. This happens with people in a personal basis. So that walk and talk is the key to what goes into what turns out to be a book in most cases of elements that are reverse stick build of the building. Did I answer your question, or we got off on three things?
No, we got off on three things, but it answered a few different questions I probably would have had if you didn't go down that route. But so ultimately, though, the one thing I want people to take away from this episode is, one, be prepared for those calls. Two, know what little or what much you have to do, which we kind of chalked it up to. Make sure you're protecting the asset, make sure you're limiting risk, make sure you're not creating different liabilities.
Right.
Three, make sure that they have someone like yourself to be able to call the next day to coach them through. A phone call to you doesn't cost anything.
No.
A phone call to you at least helps you line up all the things that they might not even realize.
We give a lot of advice in order to get people to understand. I said before, the more people know, the better. And that'll be to my dying day. The more you know about the process and the agendas, I have an agenda too. Everybody has an agenda. It doesn't mean your agenda is bad. It's just the question is, does this one plug and play in this situation, or does that one? What do you want to do? You have to know what the circumstances are, and everything's different. I don't fill the bill for everybody. There's people who need that contractor type who's going to do everything because that's what they do. Investor type people go, nah, I don't think so.
Yeah, well, if someone like Tom's got his own crews out there. He just needs you to be on his side to defend him against insurance because he doesn't know what the heck he's talking about with that. And then his crews, you get him the most money you can get for the claim, and then he goes and handles it himself.
Yeah. So one of the arguments that we've had of late with a couple different adjusters, things are changing. The landscape changes all the time. So one of the conversations we've had recently is adjusters who say, well, I'm not going to pay you for that because I know he's not going to do it. It's like, wait a second. That's not what the policy says. The policy says that you owe the actual cash value of the damages. The damages are, this is the damage. This joist goes all the way, this one-piece joist, it goes all the way under the bathroom over there. I'm entitled to take the bathroom apart in order to replace the joist. That's the rules of the game. You don't have a way out of that.
Yeah.
Now, that's a conversation that we have to prevail in. But the reality is that an insured is entitled to the actual cash value of the loss, even if he was selling the building tomorrow. Doesn't matter what he does or doesn't do. The recoverable depreciation, assuming you have a replacement cost policy, only comes to bear if you're going to make claim for it because you did all the work and you spent all the money. So it's a different topic. Don't mix them.
Gotcha. All right. So what was for the real estate side of things, Chicago real estate, you have all your friends are in real estate. You roll with all these guys.
Pretty much.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's how you got connected here. What's the next 5 years look like in Chicago real estate? There's a lot of crazy things happening right these days.
I am absolutely amazed. We turned management over to a woman in the neighborhood who other friends of mine had used in some way, and she opened her own shop and she took over my bigger buildings. And then we moved her into the office right next door, which became vacant, and renting a storefront on Loyola Avenue near Loyola University is like, it's not happening. We've been lucky so far, and we had a couple of early child care centers there, including Waldorf School was there for like 10 years. But anyhow, it's served well to put her there. I am astounded by the increases that we're able to get in rent. The reality is we need it. We've got 100-year-old buildings. I think I sent you a picture of my boiler, didn't I?
Yep.
I'm still running a 1915 pair of 𝗬𝘗𝗃 I spent a lot of money on welding, and I'm sure at some point I'm going to have to change them out, but I'm in no hurry to.
Yeah.
But they're older buildings, and they need care, and they need attention. That's just the reality of that. So you add that to the water increases, the taxes increases, the insurance increases.
Big topic.
Well, I know a couple of people in the real estate world who are going, this deal no longer pencils out. We are no longer interested in this property because the price of insurance has tipped it the other way. And I think that is, it's a much larger discussion and question about how insurance companies operate, how much leverage they have, and what the departments of insurance are and are not doing in the industry, and what is corporate America's mentality on this topic. I mean, these are much bigger questions, but they affect us. Yeah. And they make, so when the increases come across, I have to say, hey, I'm surprised we get that, but if that's what we get because you have your finger on the pulse now and I don't as much, I accept it. Because we're still getting above average tenants, I believe. And, I meet plenty of them in the hallway. So I'm grateful for that. But I realize it's a burden, it's a strain, and it's a challenge as an industry. And you may have heard me in some of the comments at MBOA, et cetera, where I always try to emphasize, maybe not so successfully, but I try to emphasize that we need to dial back the tone between tenants and owners so that it's not confrontational. Yeah. There's real problems for middle America that almost doesn't exist anymore. And the fact of the matter is we pay our mortgages, our values increase. Yes. Is everybody capable of doing that? No. That's why they rent. Okay, great. But they have some issues, and real wages haven't gone. I mean, those are big picture things, but there's real issues that if we get them going on in the conversation, you got to have some feeling for what the other side is dealing with, or you're going to have confrontation, and it's a battle we can't win.
We have 1,500 tenants, and I always tell them, like, we have less problems if we have good rapport, whether it be internally or externally. And all the different tenant rights people, they have less of a leg to stand on if the tenants actually have great rapport with the individual investors or owners, like you have. Like, and so that's impressive, and like that's what that could actually solve more than the head-on fights that we do with, like we just did recently with the Bring Home Chicago tax. Like it was tenants versus investors.
A client friend of mine under the landlord-tenant ordinance thing got stung for $100,000 years ago, $100,000, and he was doing some of the best work on the West Side as an individual, doing good things. Guy walks on water. Are you serious? That's the kind of stuff that shouldn't happen, but it does. And the sad fact is that there's bad actors in every industry, and as landlords, we take a hit for the few bad guys, and that's what gets pumped up by certain other political elements because that's what they find as leverage. And is it true? No, but we're stuck with trying to dial it back and come to a reasonable conversation about it, and let's see if we can't find a solution. Again, at the end of the day, everything we've got is about conflict resolution and consensus building because nobody's getting there on their own.
All right, man. That's the show. Like, we're gonna go to wrap up round. You ready for this?
I don't know. Whatever's next.
Wrap up round. Quick answers to these quick questions. What's your competitive advantage? How have you been able to do this in your industry while so many other people wish they could be as good as you?
We are so personally involved, it's almost excessive. It's almost obsessive.
All right.
Yeah.
Awesome. What's one piece of advice you tell someone that's yet to buy their first property here in Chicago?
Probably a good idea to buy something you're going to live in.
Okay. How's that? What do you do for fun?
Argentine tango.
Whoa. What?
I'm a tango guy.
Really? I can see that.
I'm on the dance floor whenever I can. A couple of weeks I'll be in Tucson for a festival. So
you seem like you move pretty smoothly around. Like I like it. That's pretty cool. All right. What's a good book, podcast, or self-development activity you're currently using and would recommend?
I just finished the other day The Mystery of Rudolf Diesel. Rudolf Diesel is the guy in the 1890s who invented the diesel engine.
I would have guessed that, yeah.
And this book is, he had a mysterious disappearance or death. This is a forensic dive into all of the material and information. It is a phenomenal viewpoint on the history that built into starting with the Franco-Prussian War and moving into World War I and World War II, and how all of these things intersected with the diesel engine, and also what kind of fuel we're building, because his original designs for the diesel engine were to use biomass.
Really?
He was using nut oil, so you didn't need petroleum. Really? So it's an amazingly fun story. Could not put the book down.
I'll have to check that out. I like history, so. All right, besides yourself, name one person in your local network you'd highly recommend to other investors as a quality resource. One of your guys.
I got here because of Andy Doleff.
Okay.
He's like an amazing guy.
What's Andy Doleff do?
Andy Doleff is an insurance broker, and he is the only broker on every single fire, every significant claim that shows up. He actually shows up personally to see to it that everything is okay.
That's awesome.
And you can't, there's only one other guy who ever did that. His name was Karl Rehn, old school German guy from Lincoln Avenue, 3-generation shop. He was the only other guy who did that. I mean, it's a rare thing, but he's very involved in the builders organizations and helped put the new one on the map, the Southwest housing provider operation. He's really invested in the industry doing well and having good rapport, and we appreciate that.
The Southwest organization, they give a lot. I'll put a link in the show notes for their meeting, but they do a lot out there. They've only been around a short time, but they have these great meetings, meetups, and everything.
Jackie Jablonski is just. She's a very innovative woman. She's got
grit.
Oh, and МOXie, like you cannot believe. This girl's got an angle here, an angle here. She does. She's playing the piano with 4 hands.
Yep. All right, last one. Thank you so much. You provide a ton of value for our listeners. How can they learn more about you, and is there any way they can provide value to you?
Well, we hope you don't have a fire. Call me in the morning if you do.
We'll link to all your information in the show notes. That way they have it.
Yeah.
All right.
We really hope that people
want them to be
losses. Be proactive. Really be careful. Here, the biggest thing. All right, let's go back on that one. The most important thing that everybody can do is be highly selective about your tenants. Invariably, not all, but many fires happen because of bad actors in the apartments. I call it OE, operator error, and it's not talking about the owner. It's the tenant who's got a dollar extension cord and they're running a thing. It's stupid stuff. It's the person who fell asleep on the couch with a cigarette. You know, are you serious? It's $500,000 later. What are you, nuts? Back to the intuition thing. I knew something was wrong there, but I took the tenant anyhow.
I had a tenant fire report at 5 a.m. I was driving down the south side. It was over in South Chicago, and I got there, and the tenant is crying on the front lawn, saying, "Why did this happen to me again?" So that was her second house she burned down. Of course, I had to go back and see if there's any red flags, and there was
sure
red flags.
There were.
Yep,
There were.
It was about 15 years ago now, but yeah, she was literally stuff. She's like, "What? I mean, this happened again? Like, what do you mean?" Then she told me the whole story about how it happened last time, and she lost all her stuff. I'm like, "Oh my gosh,
repeat offender."
Oh yeah. So, all right, that was awesome. We're going to, man. Thanks for coming out here today, man. I'm going to finish up here the show by simply saying thank you, listeners. If you found any value, we'll put Dorian's information here in the show notes, and we'll also put it on our website.
Yeah.
Go to straightupchicagoinvestor.com, check out our merch store, and if you buy something off our merch store, you get entered into future Chicago Facts. So, Dorian, thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Tom, we'll see you next time.
Next time.
I'll see you next Thursday.